everybody, welcome to another lesson of Japanese. Today we are going to be covering a broad topic, no pun intended here. We're going to be covering the differences between female and male speech in Japanese. Okay, so now we are going to split our explanation into basically kind of three categories. The three most prominent things that will differ between female and male speech. The second category is basically going to be sentence ending particles or sentence ending things in general. The kind of things that you will put at the end of your sentence to flourish it. It will make you sound more feminine or more masculine. So that was the first category, first person pronouns, the one that is like probably the most likely to happen. The one you're going to be able to rely on most to distinguish what gender the speaker is. If they say boku, then you're going to go, oh, that's a dude or something like that. We're going to move into our next category, which is slightly less indicative, but it's still pretty, it gives you a pretty strong degree of telling whether the speaker is male or female. That is going to be basically the sentence ending particles or sentence enders. This is probably the most, the longest category, even if it's not the kind of most distinguishing. So hopefully if you're watching this video, you're already familiar with sentence ending particles, things like ka, yo, no, etc. It would be good if you knew the grammatical function of these kind of particles, because right now we're just going to be talking about them in relation to kind of the gender aspect of them, not too much the grammatical one. So if you don't already know the grammatical functions of them, you might get confused, so I would recommend checking out our previous videos on those sentence ending particles. Okay, so our general guideline here is going to be that, you know, female speakers are going to tend to use a different sentence ending particle to convey a certain thing as male speakers would. So one of them would be wherein male speakers would use kind of like the sentence ending particle yo to kind of have this explanatory note. Female speakers will use the particle wa instead. Another one is that female speakers will replace the sentence ender kana, that kind of means I wonder, with kashira, which is kind of more giving more of a feeling of wonderment. And another pretty common one for female speakers is they're likely to use the kind of sentence ending particle no for statements. Basically, when they're explaining something, they'll have the sentence ending particle no after that. The sentence ending particle no is also used to ask a question, and female speakers will use it too, but male speakers also use it too. So we're not gonna distinguish it like we do for the no for statements, because that is the one that male speakers tend to not use. So both genders will kind of use the sentence ending particle no to ask a question, but as for using the sentence ending particle no to just make a statement, usually female speakers will use it more. So those are kind of the most common sentence ending phrases or particles for female speakers. I do kind of want to note out that on the topic of that thing we were saying about how it's much more common in like fictional media, anime and drama and stuff like that, the particles wa and kashira are probably more representative of that. Those ones are pretty emphatic of kind of like an old school female touch to their words, and I can't really say you'll see that as commonly in real life conversation as the particle no right there, which is much more modern. So yeah, if you watch a lot of anime or drama, or you plan to, or yeah, you want to keep watching them and you want to know what's going on in there, the particles wa and kashira are very feminine like. It'll add a super feminine touch. And there'll probably be a really good guideline to know that that person is just supposed to be really feminine or whatever. But in regard to real life conversation and talking to females in real life, yeah, I'm not too sure you'll come across that too much. Let's go into what kind of sentence enders / particles that male speakers use now. So they have a couple more really common ones. The first one is just going to be the copula da. We know what this copula is. We should know what it is. It's the basically casual / plain form of des, the polite copula. And so me pointing this out right now, that male speakers use da more than female speakers, might sound weird, because da has a, you know, very grammatical function to it. Sometimes it's absolutely necessary in a sentence to make it grammatical. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about it in the realm outside of its grammatical necessity. So try to think of it like that. Basically, the guideline right here is that when the copula da is optional, male speakers will tend to use it as an option way more than female speakers will. For example, let's do a quick example / review here. If we were talking about adjectives, we should know that in the plain form, if they're e adjectives, you never have the copula da after them, because you can have des after an e adjective because you use it if you're being polite, but if you're being casual, then you don't use it at all. And since da is the casual form of des, if you're being casual, you just don't include da at all. You can't. If you're using a na adjective and it's the end of a sentence, the copula da is kind of optional there. So in the case of an e adjective, if we ended the sentence with an e adjective, both male speakers and female speakers, based upon our guidelines here, would just say the exact same thing. They would just say the e adjective and end the sentence. But if we were using a na adjective where the da after it is kind of optional, then in this case the female speaker would probably just use the na adjective, then the male speaker would use the na adjective plus da. The kind of justification behind this concept here is that the copula da is kind of emphatic. It kind of is like saying is with an emphasis. So since male speech it tends to be more rough, more emphatic, male speakers are more likely to say da than female speakers. Let's go into our next point for male speech regarding sentence ender. Male speakers tend to use the sentence ending particle ze, zo, and kind of the character e after other sentence ending particles. For example, the sentence ending particle ka, which is turning into a question, sometimes they'll add an e after that to turn into kai. So kai would be used instead of ka to ask a question and kind of show that your sentence is a bit more manlier. Similarly, the e sometimes goes after da, so it would be dai. Then as for the zo and the ze, these are very common in fictional media, anime, and drama and stuff. You'll see this all the time. It super adds masculinity to their sentences. If the character who's saying it is especially of a kind of archetype that's really manly, like some kind of samurai or some kind of punk or some kind of gangster or something, they'll definitely use ze or zo as a sentence ending particle. And in real life, it probably happens if you're in a kind of casual circle of guys who are talking amongst each other. They'll be pretty manly. And so even though those two right there are really heavily seen or heard in anime and drama and stuff like that, it's also probably pretty common in real life, to be honest. Another thing about male speech in regard to sentence enders, this one isn't kind of too much at the end of a sentence. It could technically happen at any location in the sentence, but basically they turn the sound of I into e. So this would apply to basically the negative nai form of verbs as well as adjectives. So this would basically apply to the negative nai form and adjectives. So if you have nai, they can turn it into ne, and if you have an adjective that ends in I, like takai, which means like tall or expensive, you can say take instead. And the last point that we'll mention for sentence enders for male speech is that they tend to change the sentence ending particle ne to na, and we should know that the sentence ending particle ne is kind of seeking affirmation thing where you go ne and it's kind of like saying right or like right. They turn to na, which sounds kind of more masculine. I'm not too sure if you can tell, but if you kind of familiarize yourself with the Japanese language, na just kind of sounds more rougher than ne. Okay, that's going to cover it for the second category, the sentence enders. We're going to move on to our last category, which is kind of select phrases and words. Okay, so that's going to wrap it up for this video. I hope you learned something, and I hope you enjoyed your time doing so. If you'd like to express that, you can like the video, leave a comment below, or subscribe if you haven't already. If you'd like to support more of these video lessons, please do consider checking out our Patreon page. Also included on the screen right now are, of course, a bunch of links on where to find and follow us elsewhere online. Lastly, check out our Discord server. We've got a community of hundreds of so if you're looking for somebody to voice chat with just to practice speaking Japanese, or if you just want to talk about anime or music or manga. And with that, see you next time.